lesson is suggestion. Suggestion in Bahasa Indonesia is saran. So what is a suggestion? Suggestion is an idea that someone proposes atau ide yang diajukan oleh orang. So for example, this one. I don't feel so good today. So her friend advises her or gives a suggestion. You should go see a doctor. So another example is this one. Our river is so dirty. Suggestion is we had better clean it up. So how do you make a suggestion? So there are many ways. You can use the following. So you can have signal words. You can start with why don't, what about, you should, you can, or you had better. If you are going to use why don't, so it should follow a structure. So why don't, the following is subject plus predicate plus object. So you can say, why don't you go to the doctor? The next is what about. If you're going to use what about, the next word should be verb plus ing. So you can say, what about going to the doctor? The next one is you should. So if you're going to use you should, it should be followed by verb 1 or the present tense, like you should go to the doctor. If you're going to use you can, it's also followed by verb 1. If you're going to use you had better, you also are going to use verb 1 as the next word. So you can say you had better go to the doctor. So try to be familiar with the structure of the following so that it will be easy for you to make suggestions using the following signal words. So let's have another example. So the problem is I have no more money to pay for school fees. So you can say, why don't you take a loan? Bagaimana kalau kamu ngambil hutang, okay, or loan? So if you're going to use why don't, it should be followed by a subject, and then you have the verb and the object. So the next one is, what about asking money from your parents? So if you're going to use what about, it should be followed by verb ing. Next is, you should tell your advisor about it. So if you're going to use you should, it should be followed by verb 1, which is tell. The next one is, you can ask help from your friends. So you can is followed by verb 1, which is ask. And the last one is, you had better find a way to pay your school fees. So you had better is followed by verb 1, which is find. So let's have another example. My grade in math is low. So what are the suggestions? Like, why don't you study a little bit harder? So if you're going to use what about, so the structure will change. The next word will be verb ing. So it will be, what about studying a little bit harder? If you're going to use you should, the next should be a verb 1. You should study a little bit harder. The next one, if you're going to use you can study a little bit harder. If you're going to use you had better, it should also be followed by verb 1. So in kalau you should, you can, and you had better, sama followed by verb 1. Kalau what about, dibarengi atau setelah itu adalah verb ing. Kalau why don't, langsung pakai subject. Okay, so remember, if it is you start with why don't, it should be followed by a subject. If you are going to start with what about, it should be followed by verb plus ing. And then if you are going to start with you should, you can, or you had better, should be followed by the present tense atau verb satu. Okay, so there are other ways to make suggestions. You can actually use the words I suggest, I advise, I recommend, how about, or you ought to. So ini juga bisa dipakai.